Hello and welcome to Soul Symbols. My name is Shelley. I'm a writer, an astrologer, and a card reader, and I'd like to welcome you to my channel. Today is How to Tarot Tuesday, and what it is on every Tuesday I do a special tarot reading. What I do is, starting with the major arcana of the 78 card tarot, I pull one card from each of the 78 cards of the tarot, and I pull that card from 3 different tarot decks. I choose the images that I believe most represents that card, or gives the best imagery for it. And we go ahead and we talk about the images in that card. Now, if after we talk about the imagery, I do let the watcher choose their own tarot deck. Then when you choose your own deck, I will do a special reading with your tarot deck, saying how that card manifests in your life. Now, today we're doing a very powerful card. We are doing lucky number 13 of the major arcana, which is the Death card. And Death is, again, very profound. It's a very powerful card. And the imagery is one that is very, very unique, and it's probably one of the most feared cards of the tarot, and it's the one that, basically means change. Now, if you choose to not watch you do not have to watch the description of the card if you don't want to. If you'd like to skip directly to your reading, the timestamps are in the description box below, as are all the names of the authors and artists of the decks and the tools that I use. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to get started. Now, for all of the folks who have followed me, I have a lucky number. I have a wonderful 14 subscribers, and I'm so grateful for every single one of you. Thank you for following. And if any of you have been following me this entire time, as I've gone through the first 12 cards of the arcana, you can tell that we're kind of really getting into the thick of it now, right? All of the cards in the major arcana are very powerful. They're major life events. But what I like about the tarot is that it's in essence a storytelling game. It is really just a game. All you're doing is pulling images. But the beautiful thing about oracle cards and tarot reading, is that the images are meditative. Just like you can analyze your dreams, or you can look at a symbol and kind of get its meaning, and its meaning can speak to you. Now, the number 13, just like the Death card itself, is very feared. And I also, just like several other cards in the deck, like the Tower or like the Devil, it's one of the most feared cards in the major arcana. So I knew I had my work cut out for me when I looked at the calendar and said, oh, okay, we're talking Death today. So, but for all of its fearful, for all of the fear that it invokes, Death is quite a beautiful card. It really is not as bad as it seems. Now, the number 13, again, is a very spiritual number. There are 12 months in a year. There are 12 disciples in Christian religion. And the 13th means, the very number 13 kind of means the realm beyond our understanding, right? It is almost kind of like the crossing over to something new, because we 12 is a very mystical kind of, again, we have, so many months in a year, there are 12 astrological signs. There are 12 disciples in the Bible. There are, so the moment that you cross over to number 13, it is like going into a different realm. And that is very true of the Death card. Now, when you look at the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith of Death, it does invoke a lot of fear. What it is you see a skeletal figure, someone who looks like, a skeleton wearing armor, wearing black armor, who's riding a white horse. Now, what's very kind of disconcerting is the horse has what looks like glowing red eyes, and he's carrying a flag, a black flag, with a white rose on it. Now, Death traditionally is considered to be one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And when you look at it, when you think of a skeleton, when you think of, a lot of times, you'll see cards depict death as kind of skeletal or as having a scythe or, cutting down. Now, when you look at a flag, I mean, the traditional meaning of a flag is staking a claim, right? It's proclaiming dominance. It's saying, okay, I have come, I have conquered, right? So when you see this very, fear-invoking skeleton come up, and he's sitting very, very straight on his horse, and what you see in the background is you see two towers, and you see a sun that is blazing, and you don't know if that sun's rising or setting, right? You definitely see water and mountains. And it's funny, those two towers we're going to see a little bit later with the moon card. In the background, everything looks very, very gray. You do see boats and you see water. But what is fearsome is that when you look at the horse seems to be walking very slowly, right? It's not like it's galloping. It doesn't have to rush. It's almost as if death is taking its sweet time. And then before death, you see what looks like a bishop or a priest wearing golden robes. And the bishop he's not crumpled. It isn't that he's not affected, but it is almost as if he is the same color as the sun. He's looking up as if you're not sure whether or not he is next, or if for some reason with his faith, he is unaffected. At death's feet, you see a woman who seems to be losing color. She's kind of crumpled over as if she is in the midst of succumbing to death. And then you also see a small child. Now, what you often see is that sometimes you'll see a child offering death a flower, and that's kind of a sign of innocence. But it is also a sign that age and religion really doesn't have any effect on death. If it is your time, it's your time, right? Now, the other thing that you see is you see what looks like somebody who's wearing one of those kind of mink coats or mink with a crown. And it kind of looks like a king, right? It looks like a fallen king. And that's the interesting part about death, is that it really does not matter if you're a king or a queen. It doesn't matter. Again, he's all powerful that way. Now, when you think about it, it's like the very meaning of death is the closing of one door and the opening of another. It's like you've seen the skeletal symbol of death quite a lot. You've seen it in classic stories like, we just came out of the Christmas season. You've probably seen A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens a million times. And you see the Ghost of Christmas Future. And he seems very much like the Grim Reaper, right? That's what you think of when you see a skeleton, coming to get you, right? You think of a Grim Reaper. Now, and then also, there's other more ghastly kind of representations of death. You've actually seen it a little bit more in cartoons. There's a cartoon called Grim and Mandy that has a character of death. There's also several very classic movies that actually depict death. But the main meaning, and again, we'll get into this. This is going to be, today's subject is a little weightier, so it's probably going to be a little longer. But what it really is it's just, when you think about the Ghost of Christmas Future or the Grim Reaper, or all it is it's the completing of a chapter, right? It's concluding something. And now, the two other cards that I picked to help clarify death is, I went with the Secret of Tarot. And what I think is beautiful about this card is, in the background you see what looks like a dying tree. And again, in all of the cards you have what looks like either a setting sun or a rising sun. And really you don't know which it is, right? And then in front of this woman who's wearing all green, who is very pale and wearing all green, which is growth. And if you look at the hem, she's got symbols of life and vitality. And then she's got her hand, waving at what looks like a tree that is sprouting, that is new. So again, death is not so much of something to be feared. So many people feel like, oh gosh, the moment the death card comes out, it means something, that someone's going to pass away, or that that it means something bad's going to happen. And it's really, it's about moving from the known to the unknown. It's about crossing over. And the interesting thing is that it is proven, the thing about life, the thing about our energies, because we don't know much about life. We go through life and we go through the cycles of it. And death is a cycle of life, right? It is a cycle of life. A lot of times you see it depicted by the butterfly. The caterpillar is the one insect, the one animal on life that actually transforms from a worm to a butterfly, and it literally crystallizes itself. It turns into a soup. It breaks down, it goes through a death in its living life and becomes something new in the same lifespan. And so it's transformation. That's what death means. It is proven that, because if you ask a scientist, and you don't even have to be all woo-woo with it, you don't even have to be an astrologer or a new ager, energy cannot be created or destroyed. Energy can only transform from one form to another. So I'll repeat that. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only transform from one form into another. And so when you see death, it is a sign that something is transforming from one form to another. It may mean you're in an in-between state, just like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. You might be in that kind of butterfly soup. You might be going through a divorce, because in that sense, when you think about it from an ego perspective, if you were a wife and then you get a divorce, you're no longer a wife. It's a death of that role. You are no longer that person. And your ego needs to transform. You need to let that old ego sense of self go and become something new. And again, you're taking the same energy, you're taking what you learned from that life experience and becoming the new you. So a lot of times death is about being in the middle. It's about being in the transition. You can see this woman is between the two trees, right? And you might be not quite to having leaves yet. You might not be in the dead tree state anymore. Or a lot of times people, again, I understand the death it's a scary card. It's just a scary card, but it's shedding the old attitudes. It is almost like focusing on, just like with that tree that in the background, it's taking yourself down to the bare elements. Just like the butterfly has to kind of liquidate itself. If you think about water, it's H2O. It's two hydrogen, two oxygen bonded together. They're elements, right? They're molecules. Sometimes when you experience a death in your life, and again, that can be a death of a marriage, it can be a death of a person, it can be a death of a sense of self. Anytime you feel like something has gone through its cycle, you are it's almost like you're taking that water, breaking it into its elements, and letting those elements, those particles, come back together into a new element. And that is what death is. It can mean, taking things down to bare bones. It can be, my mom always says, sometimes there's moments in your life where you just grieve. You grieve, and then what you do is when you are broken into your molecules, right? You're not water anymore. You're a bunch of spread out molecules. You almost put your ear to the ground and kind of listen. It's like, okay, what do I need to become? What do I need to become? And so in that sense, it's a very sweeping change. And it's kind of, and what's so scary about it is that it's an inescapable change. It's something that needs to occur, right? It's something that, and something that needs to happen. You are transforming, and that's what, and again, the scariest cards in any tarot deck are always the ones that involve change. And it's proven that people, 92% of people fear change even when it's positive. Even though this change might take you to something better, you still fear it. You still fear it, right? And that's, that being in the middle, or feeling like something is inevitable, that's what makes death so scary. Either that, or feeling like something's going to be taken away from you against your will. But the one thing about death is that, yes, sometimes it can mean about something that needs to happen, something that you need to let go. But the other side of that is, if you've ever looked back on your life, one way to kind of help cope with the death card, if you get it, is think about a past relationship. Maybe you had, a previous relationship that didn't work out. And you think, oh gosh, what if you had stayed with it? What if that previous situation had not gone through a quote unquote death? What if it had not ended? Would you be where you are now if that ending had not occurred? Would you be the person that you are now if that ending had not occurred? So those are the kind of questions that you want to ask. And again, it makes death a very powerful card. It's necessary and profound change. And it is the dawning. And that's why you see the sun. You see the sun. You see the sun in the background here. And you see the sun in the background here. And I'll go ahead and go to the third card. You see the sun in the background there. Now, I wanted to go ahead, and I went with the Anna K Tarot for the third card, and I thought, and again, we're going to go into some descriptors in a minute, but I thought this is the angel of death, and you see what a kind face. He has like a soft face. He has a kind of an allure about him, and it looks like he's holding out a hand, right? He does have a scythe, but the scythe is on the ground. It's not like he's, wielding it or about to, hit you with it or anything. But he is standing in the middle of a path. And beyond that path, that could either be a rising sun or a setting sun. It's probably both, right? Again, it's the dawning of something. And here, this is going to be real important in a minute when we start to talk about, death. What it is that, it's letting go of the old so something new can be born. And it really is, there's an element of fate about it. It's the number 13. It's you have significant life events that are occurring that are going to change you they're going to break you down to your molecules, and those molecules are going to come back together. They're going to gravitate back together the way elements do, because energy is going to transform from one form to another, because that's what it does. But so in that respect, death can mean, it can mean the end of a life. It can mean the end of a life cycle. It can mean just the end of a job. It can mean the end of a marriage. Sometimes it can be very good. Again, it's about surrounding cards, but it can be the end of a trying time. If you see death next to the 10 of Wands, it can be the end of a cycle that was really challenging for you. And that sun could be rising. You could be growing a new tree that's very prosperous because you went through the tough times. Now, what I wanted to talk about a little bit is that half the reason, again, when you look at that skeleton, that's why death is so terrifying, right? In a few days, I'm going to be participating in what we call the 31 Days of Tarot, which is it's almost like a vlog event throughout January. But one of the great questions that came up last year was, they said, okay, what card do you, when you get a new tarot deck, what card do you flip to first? Like, what's the card that you always want to see, what the depiction was? Maybe you love the Lovers and you're like, oh, okay, how did this person depict the Lovers? And again, all tarot artists sometimes, really get artistic with it. Sometimes they make the description very, very elaborate. Well, it's interesting because I tend to look at death. I'm curious because again, the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, it is very fearsome, He's conquering. You've got this scary, one of the four horsemen, who seems so all powerful, riding in with a flag of conquest and staking that, and he's not even running in, he's walking, and as he's walking, people are just dropping below at his feet, right? Now, what you want to remember is, and again, you see two other cards here that are not nearly as fearsome. You have different interpretations of what death is. Now, I was excited to do this topic because death carries over. I'm going to put my writer hat on, The depiction of death in literature and in life is such a complex one, because think about it. Okay, the Rider-Waite-Smith was done by Pamela Coleman Smith at the turn of the century, right? And someone sat down and she was told how to draw the cards, right? This wasn't all her imagination, but if someone sat down and said, hey, draw death, right? And with all the meanings that we talked about, transformation, energy going from one form to another, the ending of a cycle, being in the in-between, butterfly soup, right? Grieving, accepting loss, really accepting it at your core. What does that look like? If you had to draw it, what would you draw, right? What would you draw? And here we're already looking at three different ones. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit, and I knew this was, I'll try not to get too long-winded, but when you talk about it, and we talk about this when I went to my tarot retreat, and also when you just study, death in general, when you're a writer, you could even think about it like there's books where death is the protagonist, right? What is it? The book thief. The death is actually a voice. He's a first person. No, he's an omnipresent narrative voice in that book. He's one of the two tellers of the story. Now, other depictions of death is that there's definitely been a lot of movies about it. You see people personify death, like, and that's the question that tarot readers always ask ourselves, is that when you look at any card, it doesn't have to be death, it can be any card. If you look at the Sun, if you look at the Nine of Pentacles, one way to help us read, one way that a reader or a tarot or oracle card reader can interpret a card is saying, what does this character see? Like if I were in that armor, if I were the skeleton of this character, how would I feel? What would I be looking at? How would I see? And that's the thing, is that when you think about this, if this is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, does he have feelings, right? Does he feel? Does he have opinions about things? Does he like his job? That's why death is such a complex card, is because you ask yourself, okay, what does death mean to you? Is he a malicious? Does he like to collect souls? Is he impartial? He just does what he does? And that is almost kind of like a Christmas Carol, because like the Ghost of Christmas Future doesn't seem like he has any emotions. He just does what he does, right? Then, you've seen movies where there's one movie that's like, I think it's a Dutch movie that's like from the 30s or 40s that really it's probably the first time death has ever been personified, but what they did is they delayed death. Someone waylaid him, like they detoured him, and then nobody could die. And it was interesting when death finally came back, there were people who were avoiding him. And then there were people who were lining up because it was like, at last, you're here. I've been waiting for you, right? And it's, because when you think about it, you can't not close out a cycle, right? Life goes on. Life goes on. You have to, if you remained in the same state, like what if you didn't graduate high school? If you just went through high school over and over and over again, never graduated, never went to college, never got married, you wouldn't be transforming, you wouldn't be going. And that kind of plays into the world a little bit too, because the world is a little bit more of a graduation. But that's kind of like what you talk about when you think about death, is like, okay, what does it mean? Does it have feelings? Does it like what it does? And when you think about it, okay, what does, if death could be personified by a person or a thing, what would death be? Like, again, if you had to draw the card of death, if you had to draw a tarot card that meant all of these things, had the symbolism, what would you draw? And the interesting thing is that, when you think about it, the other thing about death is that it's, in Greek mythology, one of the first, depictions of someone fooling death, or humans fooling death, was, what was it? It was the character who ended up rolling a boulder like up a hill for eternity because he tricked or he fooled Hades. Now the thing is, the god of the underworld isn't so much death itself. He just rules. He's the ruler of the realm in which souls that have passed over reside. But death is actually the person that comes to collect the souls, the person who arrives and, kind of, if you really had to think about it, I think Greek mythology would be the oarsman, the person on the boat. They would put 2 coins over your eyes, and what it was payment for the person who took you across the river of death into the underworld. Now, so that's another personification. Now, a few other ones that, so again, okay, if you had to personify it, what would you say? Sometimes you could think, if you wanted to think of death as having, the other thing is, a lot of Greek mythology, a lot of the gods have a lot of human characteristics. They're competitive, they're jealous, they're egotistical, they would punish you if you cross them, right? But when you think about it, it's like, okay, is death that kind of character, right? Is it someone who is vindictive? Is it someone who would come after you, right? The other thing, is it like a tax collector? If you watch the How to Tarot and Justice, there's the scale, and in one scale you had the heart, the other scale you had a feather. And again, it was kind of weighing up how heavy your soul is in life. You can almost think of that as like a death concept, okay, what if it's like a tax collector? When you pass, do you get judged, before, as to where you're going, what kind of life have you lived? What kind of sins have you committed? And is death like that? Is he like a judge? Is he like a tax collector who's like, okay, well, you've done these deeds, now it's time to pay for them? So you could think of it that way. The other thing is, it was interesting, if you look at death in the reverse, there was actually a Twilight Zone episode from 1962, and it was called Nothing in the Dark. And it was about an elderly woman who hid in her house. And people thought she was crazy because she kept saying, I'm avoiding death. I've tricked death, like I've outrun death. And what happens is, and when you think about it, if you look at death in reverse, you can kind of think, okay, that's That's death in reverse is really when you were trying to avoid there's a delay of your transformation. Like you're not letting your tree grow. It almost looks kind of uprooted, right? And when you think about it, when this card is in the reverse, you've got the green on the left and you got the dead tree to the right. And when you think about, transition, you kind of think progression is left to right, and you're thinking that you're going the wrong way, right? But this Twilight Zone episode was interesting because the woman was terrified. The little old lady was terrified of death. She didn't want to go. She was afraid. She was like, it's a terrible thing, right? And that's what happens when you see death in reverse. You think of him as fearsome. And what was beautiful about that episode is that it had a very young Robert Redford, 26-year-old Robert Redford. He still had a little bit of a furrowed brow, but gosh, he was handsome nonetheless. But what it was is that death takes on the form of 26-year-old Robert Redford, and he pretends to be an injured police officer. And the little old lady takes pity on him and nurses him back to health, and then he confesses. And she looks at him and says, "You tricked me." And he goes, "Yeah, I did." He goes, "I'm sorry." And she's like, "I don't want to die, I don't want to go." And he said, "There's nothing to be afraid of. It's a natural course of life. What you're so afraid of ending is just the beginning." And what was beautiful is he holds out his hand almost the way that this angel did. And that's why I chose this card, is because I saw that scene, and he said, and she does, she's got tears streaming down her face, and she takes his hand, Robert Redford's hand, and he goes, "See? What you thought was gonna be, come out as an explosion went as soft as a whisper." And she's like, "Well, when will it happen?" And he said, "It already has." So again, sometimes when we look at death in the reverse, we're avoiding it. We're afraid of it. We think we're resisting it. We're digging in our heels. But, sometimes it's meant to happen, and it's a good thing, Now, again, depending on surrounding cards, sometimes it can be sudden. Sometimes it can be a little shocking. But again, just trust in the fact that everything in life, and all of the cards, all majors, they're natural life events. They're things that have happened all the time. And one other way to kind of cope is to say, and this is a natural kind of coping strategy just for any type of, of life event. You can tell yourself, this looks like a scary thing, but let me look back on my life and what have I already done in my life that was just as difficult, right? You're bound to have times in your life that you survived, right? You made it through. And death is like that. Death is like that. It's not, it is transformation, and that's what makes it such a feared card. But when you look at it, it's like, again, when you see that hand being held out to you, it's kind of inevitable. He's standing in the middle of the path, but he's not, wielding that scythe around his head. It's like Robert Redford holding out his hand and saying, what you thought was going to come as an explosion has come as a whisper, right? Now, I just wanted to touch on a few other depictions, and there's a lot of great ones in movies, but, again, a lot of times death is depicted as something that's vengeful or that's kind of out to get you. In the Harry Potter series, you had the story of the Deathly Hallows and the three brothers, that there were three things created by death. And the third brother, who seems to be the most resourceful, also plays in, many of the stories are about eventually surrendering, about eventually giving in to the transformation. But the third brother had the cloak, the invisibility cloak, and eventually he took the invisibility cloak off and greeted death as an old friend and went with him willingly, right? Now, some other depictions are, one big one that you see is like the kind of cheesy horror movies, like, well, for the record, there is the Final Destination movies, and to their defense, the first one I always thought was really great, and I was you know how sometimes when you listen to a song, you like the lyrics, and then you look at the writer, you look who wrote the song, and you're like, oh my God, that's like my favorite, music artist ever. He wrote this, that's why I like the song. When I looked at the credits for the first Final Destination movie, it's written by Glenn Morgan, and he is an X-Files alumnus. And I love X-Files. James Wong too. But they wrote that movie, and it's funny when you look at it, there's 2 FBI agents in the movie, and it did turn out that it was originally, the very first Final Destination movie was supposed to be an X-Files episode, and it ended up being too long. And so they turned it into a movie. But when you watch that movie, the fact that it isn't so much, the sequels make death out to sound very just, it's just gratuitous gore. The sequels were really bad. I didn't really watch too many of the sequels. The only one that really spoke to me was the one that, proved to me why I will never ever go to a tanning bed, ever. I will stay pale, thank you. But the first movie really was, I thought it was prophetic in the fact that it talked about it almost being like mousetrap. Like, if you set off the course of life, if you interrupt it, there's like a glitch in the system, and then it almost gains momentum as it tries to correct itself. And it's almost like a grid of life, or a grid of the natural progression of things. And that's what I kind of liked about the first movie, is that it wasn't even so much that death was out to get them, it's just it almost had to do what it was originally meant to do. Otherwise, it's just gonna, again, like mousetrap, keep building until it happens. Now, the last thing that I just wanted to talk about, and then we'll wrap it up, is that sometimes if you had to design your own tarot card about death, sometimes an object or a song can represent death. Like, for instance, anytime I hear taps, that represents death to me. One example, and again, it's very personal to every person too. It's almost like you couldn't make a tarot card for everyone because it's personal to you. So one thing and this will be one assignment that I give to you if you watch this installment, what symbol means death to you? And I'll just throw out a few more examples, and then I'll leave you to think about that. But for instance, my mom, she's a nurse, and she's helped vent patients, and she's helped cancer patients. And I remember one time we went apple picking, and I had this kind of kerchief, it was a plaid cloth thing, just to cover my hair, right? When you're out in an orchard, when you got, trees everywhere. And I put it over my head, and it really covered, it was a big kind of covering, and it covered all of my hair. And my mom took one look at me, and she honestly, an expression came over her face that I'd never ever seen before. And she said, "I want you to take that off." And I was like, "But why?" And she got real stern, and my mom rarely ever gets stern, and I took no offense to it. But she goes, "I'm your mother, and I told you to take it off." And I was like, okay. I didn't question it. I was obedient. I took it off. And then, my hair looked like shit, but that's okay. I listened to my mother. And then later she approached me and she apologized. She goes, "I'm sorry, I snapped at you." And I said, "No, are you okay?" And she goes, "Women who are recovering from cancer treatments, they don't, you lose all your hair, and they would wear, kind of a covering like that." And she had lost someone recently, and she did not want to see me wearing that. So a headdress, covering my head where she couldn't see my hair, it symbolized death to her. It meant death to her, and she couldn't bear it. She couldn't see it, right? It was painful to her. That can be a symbol of death. Now, in another form, and I'll leave off on this, when I was thinking about this again, I was almost evading death. It's funny, I was thinking death in reverse today, because I went all day long. It's been a rainy day. I was trying to go out for a walk, and the whole day I kept going, okay, I need to sit down and film the video. I need to sit down, and I kept thinking, God, I'm avoiding death. I'm avoiding death, right? It's it's one of those topics, right? And this year in particular has got me thinking about it a lot. But the last thing that I'll leave you off on is that if I had to list a symbol of, and again, it's also media-based, but what means death to me is that if you've ever seen the movie A League of Their Own, there is a scene when the women are in the locker room, and again, it's about World War II. All the men are away at war, and to entertain those at home, women started to play Major League Baseball. And one of the teams, and Gina Davis is one of the teammates, they're in the locker room and they're getting changed, and their coach is what is it? Oh gosh, why am I? Is Tom Hanks. And there's this young kind of really not so, thoughtful guy who's delivering a telegram. And it's one of those yellow telegrams that the military sent out in mass to alert the women that their husbands were killed on the battlefield. And, this guy with the little, it looks like a police hat, but it's a male hat. He comes in and he gets past the woman who guards the door, and he ends up walking in the room, and Tom Hanks is right behind him, like, okay, where are you going? What's going on? And he's looking at his clipboard and he's like, yeah, I got a telegram for one of you. And everybody, all the women freeze. They just freeze. They're sitting on the benches, they're lined up, and it's almost like, it's almost like shooting fish in a barrel. It's like, okay, who's that telegram for, right? And Gina Davis is right next to another one of her colleagues, and the guy's like, yeah, the guy with the clipboard, the male boy is like, yeah, this is the telegram they send you anytime. They can't even put a name on it telling you your husband's dead. And he's just being so verbally oblivious. Tom Hanks just grabs, the telegram out of his hand, shoves the guy out of the room, and the guy's protesting like, hey, that's mail, you can't steal mail, and he's like, get out of here. And Tom Hanks rips open the telegram, he reads it, figures out who's it for, and he starts the very slow walk down the line of women. And he's, as he passes each woman, the woman runs crying because they've been, the moment he walked past her, it wasn't her, right? He stops in front of Gina Davis and the other woman, and he ends up giving the telegram to the other woman, who breaks down into tears and hysterics. And basically, that person's life's going to change. They lost their husband. They lost their other half. Their whole world is being changed with one yellow telegram. And the next scene, you see Gina Davis back at the house crying on her bed because you don't want it to happen to someone else, but you're so freaking relieved it's not you. And it is. It's kind of like that's this personification of how strong death is. It can be lost. It can be lost, but it's also, it's also change. It's change, right? It's change that can be sudden, but is mostly necessary, and it just means your world is going to be different from here on out, right? So on that note, and I knew this was going to be a little bit of a longer one, but and in that vein, I would like you to think about, what if death were a person, what would they be? If death was an object, what objects represent death to you? And I know it seems a little bit morbid, but when you kind of think about it, it's like, and again, it can be something transformative. It can be something that means, one thing becoming something new. And that's usually, that's what death means. So on that note, I knew it was going to be a powerful one, guys. But I am going to go ahead and I'm going to freeze frame, and I do ask that you choose from your intuition, and if you've watched this far, I'm sure we're all in the feels right now. But please choose a deck that you are drawn to, And I will go ahead and I am going to clarify using some oracle and a keyword of dice. But go ahead and choose your deck, and I will read how death manifests in your life right now. Okay, see you in a minute. Okay, we're back. So I'm going to go ahead, and the first deck is always the Rider-Waite-Smith. So we're going to go ahead and let's see, how is death manifesting in your life right now? And again, this whole time we've talked that sometimes it can be a little bit fearsome. But how is death manifesting in your life right now? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Go ahead and get clarification. Please clarify. How's deck 1? Thank you. And what is your keyword? Can you guys see okay? What's your keyword? Adventure. All right. All right. So guys, so deck number 1, Rider-Waite-Smith. The way that death is manifesting in your life right now is that in the past you were kind of waiting. There was something that was occurring that required that you use your intuition. There were things that were hidden from you that had not made themselves known yet. So there were things changing in your life. It's almost like the gears were kind of turning. And the High Priestess is another major arcana. But what was happening is, right in the past, you were kind of going with your intuition about a certain situation, about things that, events occurring in your life. You were leaning back. There's almost like kind of a greater, again, and death being there was a greater power, there was a bigger cycle at play here, and you were in tune with it. You are still in tune with it, where you understand, you kind of got this feeling like you're embracing the in-between. Right? You're embracing the fact that you feel like your life is transitioning from one thing to another. So this is actually a very smooth transition of death for you. But where you are presently is that you got the 4 of Cups, and underneath the 4 of Cups you got the Wheel of Fortune and the 2 of Pentacles. So what's happening is, right now, in the past you kind of felt like, okay, things are not transitioning very quickly, but you kind of understood that there was a reason for it, right? You understood that this closing out of a cycle would take a little bit of time, and you understood, you almost had like an inner knowing. You kind of sensed that the progress of things would take time. But right now you're feeling a little bit like, you're kind of feeling like this change or the closing of a cycle is just really, the new beginning is not appealing to you, right? You want what you had in the past. You don't want, it's almost as if this new beginning really is just kind of meh, right? It's just kind of like it's not exciting to you. This letting go of what was and going into something new seems it just doesn't seem exciting to you. You just feel like, gosh, I'm transforming, and it isn't that you don't like what you're becoming. You like what you know that you're becoming something new, but you just kind of feel like the gears are turning, but you feel like you're just kind of juggling, right? You're just kind of, you feel kind of stuck in the in-between, and the in-between is just, that you're becoming something new, but you're not real excited about it. But What it is telling me, though, is because this is a straight line, is that underneath the surface, you might be feeling like, okay, you know, I'm becoming something new, and what my new beginning just seems so blah, right? Seems dull. But what the universe wants you to know is that the Wheel of Fortune, and we How to Tarot on this as well, if you get a chance to watch that video, it means that things are coming that are going to be very surprising to you. It's going to be a good new beginning. It's going to be a good new beginning. It just, you do feel like you're in the in-between right now. You're in the in-between. So this is a very gentle, the nice thing about this reading is that it's a very gentle expression of death. It's nothing scary here. Now, what it is telling you, though, and the fact that it does, you know, this is depicting death, is that in the future, you might, you know, we have cups here. We have cups in the middle, and we have cups in the future. It is probably going to require this transformation. To complete this transformation is going to require that you might need to walk away from something that you emotionally invested in. And again, this doesn't have to be anything scary. This, you know, the thing I like about this card is that this person's walking away, but it doesn't mean it's forever, right? It just means that, you know, again, a minute ago you were sitting under a tree staring at the cups and just not wanting to move, right? And no wonder you're feeling so blah. It's like, I'm just getting this sense of lack of motivation, you know? You've got this great new beginning. You have the wheel turning in your favor, and you're kind of still juggling, you know, the old you and the new you. But the new you, or the future you, it might require that, it's just giving me a feeling that it might require that you walk away from your comfort zone a little bit. That's what it's the vibe I'm getting, is that you do have some really, you have a sun rising, and it is going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. It's just, what it is that in order for you to find that excitement, you need to get away from just staring at the cups. You need to stand up and move. Your future is where that guy is headed. It's not sitting there with the stagnant cups, right? And what kind of encourages, you know, what also reinforces this is that your keyword, you got adventure, but you got it upside down. You got it upside down. And so here it's telling you that you've got this wonderful new beginning. You're gonna transform into something exciting, but it just might require that you go on an adventure, right? You can't stay in the same place. You can't be that woman who hides in her house not wanting to change, right? Not wanting to, you know, let go. Now, one thing else that it does say is that your guidance card is you got exhaustion. You got exhaustion. And, you know, what this is telling me is that, you know, again, the juggling of the Two Pentacles came underneath the meh card, right? And this can, you know, the Four of Cups does mean, you know, it can mean feeling like apathy, right? I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to get up. I want to sit under the tree and just be like meh. And here you can see you've got these spirits that are like trying to give you a star, trying to encourage you, and you can see he's at the base of a staircase, right? If he musters up the energy to go up the stairs, he's gonna get somewhere, right? You're gonna get somewhere if you stand up and start walking. And red is the color of action. It's the color of passion, right? But it is kind of telling me that you're not quite, you know, in the future. When you get some energy, there is a great future ahead of you. There is. It doesn't feel like it right now because you have to balance so much. And, you know, moving forward, it is going to feel a little bit like a loss. Death does have that element of loss. You're going to feel like you're walking away from something that you really put a lot of energy into. But just know that, again, you know, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just transforms from one form to another. So if you're exhausted because you're putting all your energy into the past and the future, you might need to put one of those pentacles down. You might need to stop putting energy into what's already actually let go, grieve and let go, and go towards putting your energy towards something different. That would be the way that you close out the cycle and really get to that adventure that's been delayed. But just know, for right now, the wheel is turning. You don't have to do this tomorrow. It is telling you that you're a little worn out. But just know that it might, the scary part of it is it might require that you might feel like you're walking away from something, but just know that whatever you're walking away from you'll know that it's the right thing to do. It's going to be the right thing for your transformation. All right, so deck number 1, that was your reading. So deck number 2, we'll go ahead, and you got the beautiful kind of regeneration card. I really do love this depiction of death. It's quite beautiful. But let's see, how does death manifest for you? How does death manifest for pile number 2? Oh, thank you. Oh, wow, guys. Okay. Okay. Can you still see? All right. And what? Thank you. Oh, gosh. Wow. And let's go ahead and get a keyword for you. Now this is interesting, and I'll get into that in a minute, but let's go ahead and just see if there's something else. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. But so guys, I really kind of get, for deck 2, I kind of get that you've been a lot more accepting of your transition. Like, you've really, it almost feels like you're a little bit not ahead of death, so to speak, but it kind of feels like as if the loss or the death has kind of already occurred for you. And the reason I say that is that both in the death card, you see how the tree is behind her and she's looking forward to the new sprouting. So that kind of makes it feel as if you've already kind of, like, the impact or the hit of the loss has already occurred. And in the past position, you got the Fool, which is that, it's the trusting in the universe. It's going on a journey and kind of stepping off the cliff and knowing that everything's going to be okay. Now, in the present, and what kind of lines up death, and the Five of Swords kind of fell at an angle. You got the Seven of Wands, and you got it kind of crossed by the Five of Swords, and then at the root of it you have the Ace of Swords. And this is what we call a pip deck. It just means that the 1 through 10 of the suits does not have an actual story. It doesn't have, traditional images. But what it kind of tells me is, it tells me that you've been standing your ground. You've kind of already started your transition. You've already kind of jumped off the diving board, so to speak, and your journey has begun. Your transformation has started. But what it is it just feels like right now you're in between the death of the one tree and the growth of the new one, and you really feel like you're guarding it. You're kind of holding your own. You're struggling with it a little bit. In the present, you almost feel like this transformation has been a little bit tough, in the fact that whatever loss that you went through, there were winners and losers. Either a situation made you feel like, the Five of Swords is the one person who's kind of smiling, as other people walk away dejected. And the Seven of Wands is someone who's defending. They're holding their ground, right? And the Ace of Swords is truth. It's breakthrough. It's like saying your piece. So what I'm kind of getting is that it's almost as if your transformation has involved some kind of loss where you might feel a little bit outnumbered. I'm really getting that feeling, and I know that's a strange thing to say, but it's almost like you have to fight to do the right thing because other people are not doing the right thing, right? Sometimes you see that in relationships where maybe someone, betrayed the other, either that or maybe you feel like you're just standing up for what you believe to be right. Maybe you walked away from someone because they were not treating you right, but then you really haven't gotten too much justice for that. You still feel like the other person, quote unquote, won, and you kind of have to hold your ground. You have to almost say, yes, I'm, sometimes you can see that when, again, it can be in a job situation, it can be in a family situation, but I am getting just this strong feeling where you are going. The other thing about death is that just like the butterfly soup is that when the butterfly is in the cocoon, it literally has to use all of its energy to kind of liquidize itself and then put itself back together. And just like we talked about molecules, when death occurs, you are breaking yourself down to your basest parts, and it makes you very vulnerable. It makes you almost like, like you are newborn. This is death and rebirth, right? It's transformation. You are reborn. Now, the thing is, when you're in a vulnerable state like that, maybe you just came out of a divorce. Maybe, you're fighting a custody battle. Maybe you just came out of a really bad breakup and you don't feel like dating right away, but the other person started dating right away like it was nobody's business. You're kind of holding your ground. It's almost like you saying, okay, I'm vulnerable right now. And it seems like everybody else is just, acting like, like everything's fine, going about their business. But I do kind of get this feeling like you feel outnumbered. You feel like other people are doing things that are not as honest, but you're doing the right thing and you're transforming despite the fact that, you're kind of doing it alone. And what that is the sort of truth, right? You're being the example. You're being the example. I hope this makes sense. But yeah, it can sometimes feel that way, right? Again, like you're going through a very sensitive transformation, and everybody around you might not realize how hard it is for you to become that new person where your morals and what you're doing, you have to stand up for them. And you might feel like you're isolated for that, right? You might feel like, okay, I'm the only person who's doing the right thing in this situation. And it might make you feel like it sometimes makes you feel like you're losing, right? Like, same thing. Like for a dating scenario, say someone cheats on you and you walk away from that person. You go through a little death with that. And then say, for instance, everybody in your social circle has opinions about what happened. Then you kind of have to hold your own, and you kind of feel like the loser, right? Everybody's talking about you, they don't know what's going on. You're recovering, but the other person is kind of acting like nothing happened. Everybody else is talking about your business, and you have the truth on your side, and you're transforming. You will get past this, right? And that can be in any life situation. The other thing too is it can be the loss of, if you've been through any type of personal loss, like a loss of a person, or even a pet. These are the feelings that you can have sometimes, is that you just feel like it's unfair, right? You feel like you lost something and someone else gained something, and you almost have to fight to defend your stance in this situation. But just know that you have the sort of truth behind you. There's going to be, right now you have a great breakthrough. Like all of this is coming to light, but just know that you are in a very vulnerable place. You're in the middle of your transformation. You're definitely still in kind of butterfly soup right now. Now, what kind of makes me think that this might be a relationship thing or an actual loss is that you got the lost card. and you see someone who's crying, and you see kind of the hands of the heavens, and you got healer guides. And what's interesting is you got the number 5, which means change. It means change. Now, I'm just going to read this very, very quickly, just because the description of it is so much better. But but it is sorrow, depression, grief, and regret. You may be entering or experiencing a period of loss, regret, disappointment, pain, or perhaps even grief. These feelings may have arisen from present painful circumstances, or they may be a result of a surfacing or of unexpressed or unprocessed loss from the past. Whether caused by something in the past or present, your heart is ready to unburden your pain, and your soul is ready to grow from these experiences. Your healer guides are present to assist you in your healing through these difficult times. So yeah, again, just like I said about healing, about being vulnerable, as you become something new, definitely stay true to what you believe is right in the situation. And if you kind of feel like it's a win-lose, which loss can do that. Anytime something happens and you feel like something's been taken away from you, you do feel like it tends to feel like someone won, quote unquote, and that you lost. But what you have here is you have a lot of truth underneath that. Now, in your future and where you're headed is you got the 4 of Cups and you got the Sun. And the way that it kind of came out is the Sun came out above the 4 of Cups. And the 4 of Cups is really that apathy card. It's kind of like you're just feeling kind of mad, like you don't want to do anything. You don't want to make a choice. You just feel like nothing that's being handed to you is going to be of any good. But the fact that you have the Sun, which is the happiest card in the deck, it's like the breakthrough card. It's like the everything is going to get so much better card. You have that on top of the 4. It's almost crowning the 4. So I think what's happening is you're going through kind of a tough time right now, but just keep going. Keep going. The breakthroughs that you're coming through and you standing your ground, you may feel like you're kind of the loser in the situation, but that will not last for much longer. You are about to get a breakthrough where your future looks really, really bright. And that's going to be coming around the bend very soon. Very soon. It's almost like you're going to, and again, death. It's like the light at the end of the tunnel. That's kind of what I'm feeling. It's going to break through. Now, what was interesting is that the dice that I use are conversation dice, and there's all of them are blue except for the pink, and the pink is is part of the game, and you got form and opinion. Right? This is what it is that you roll this first and then you roll the other dice around it. So I keep it in with all of the dice, but you got form and opinion. And then I went ahead and I rolled another dice just for some clarification. And you got tradition in the reverse. So this kind of gave me a whole new perspective on the spread. The fact that you got the Fool in the past position means that you might have kind of struck out on your own. Maybe you kind of defied either some religious stigma, or maybe you have just some stern family values that you might have gone against, and it might have made you feel like you were becoming someone new, right? And you might have felt a sense of loss from that. Again, it isn't that, I don't think, it isn't that you're trying to break away from any I'm kind of seeing that maybe you are trying to become a new person. Maybe you're breaking away from either religious traditions or family traditions, and it's causing a little bit of conflict. It's making you feel a little ganged up on. Maybe people are trying to tell you, no, you're not right, and it's creating this kind of win-lose kind of feeling. But you have a personal truth backing that up. You're kind of like, no, this is me now, and you're holding your ground, you're sticking to this, but it is getting kind of a little conflicted. Right? This is a 5 of Swords, and this was the number 5, which means conflict. So maybe it could also be that maybe a relationship or something, maybe you want to date someone and maybe family doesn't approve, or maybe if you're of different religious backgrounds, or maybe it just conflicts with some type of belief that you have or some type of tradition. But here, the fact that these are very pink in color and this is pink, I think it's telling you to form an opinion about this. Again, the Ace of Swords is breakthrough, it's truth, it's speaking your truth. And the Five of Swords is just, you know, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent, right? So you want to, when it comes to the Five of Swords, what you want to do is you kind of want to fight fair. I always think that. Stand your ground, but try not to contribute to the win-lose, right? If, you know, if someone is trying to make you feel like a loser, don't turn around and fight fire with fire. Just stick to your truth. Just be who you are and stick to who this new person is. Really hold tight to that. And I assure you, very soon you're going to see, you know, the blessings of this transformation, this new person that you're becoming. It's almost like you're going to see the blossoming of that tree. The sun is really going to come out, and you're not going to feel so lethargic about this change anymore. It won't be as challenging, you know, moving forward. All right, guys, so that is your pile. And definitely, you know, take it easy if you need to. Try not to, you know, push yourself. If you're feeling, you know, that's the other thing about the Death card, is if you're feeling any type of loss, be gentle with yourself, because that's a powerful thing. All right, so we're going to go ahead, and the last deck, we got the Anna K. And let's see, how does death manifest in your life right now? So, how does death manifest for your life? Death and deck 3's life. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and again, I'm trying not to take a million cards, but these came out together and I can read them together. You got two other majors there. All right. Okay, we still rolling? Good. All right, let's get some clarifying. Okay, we'll go ahead and get your dice. Okay, one moment. Okay. What is your keyword? All right, so deck number 3. I can see, how is death manifesting? And again, you got the real gentle, and angel of death. You got like the, you know, nothing in the dark, Twilight Zone angel. But in the past, you got the 5 of Pentacles and you got the 7 of Pentacles. So in the past, there's a lot of pentacles in this spread, and I think what's happening is that in the past you've done a lot of evaluation. This death, the way that death is manifesting, is that you really have transformed yourself financially. In the past, you were in a position of a lot of lack, like you just, maybe you weren't making a lot of money at work, and what you did is you really analyzed, you looked at your situation and you said, okay, you know, what is not growing? Why isn't this growing fast enough? You know, is what I'm doing giving me what I need? And you were definitely feeling like, you know, you see these two people, they're out in the cold, right? You know, there's stained glass in the window, but they're out in the snow and they don't really look like they have enough clothing to keep warm. So here, you know, this could be you and another person. It could be you and a spouse. but in the past you were definitely feeling like, maybe there was just not enough money to cover the bills, and you just kept analyzing the situation. You were like, okay, what can I do differently? Why is this not? You were running an analysis of how much money you were making, what you were doing, why were you still ending up in the cold? What could you do differently? And what it is the death. And again, this was in the past, so the transformation is that the current is the King of Pentacles. So in the present, maybe you got some kind of promotion at work, or maybe you started to do something different, but you went through a great transformation, and you're doing better. You're making better money. And right now, I think in the present, you're feeling very stable. You're feeling, you may not, and again, this is a very mature energy. Now, the other thing that you can see about the King of Pentacles is he's holding up that pentacle. So the other thing that this can also represent, in addition to just saying, okay, I'm moving away from this lack, I'm doing better, is that you can see that he's much more mature, right? The guy before looked like a young farmer, didn't even have a beard. Now this person's very mature, but the King of Pentacles is very practical. You've ever heard the song lyric, got my mind on my money and my money on my mind? That's the kind of man that he is. It isn't, if he were in the reverse, he might be a little bit superficial with it, but his money, to make sure that he never goes back to that sense of lack, he's very, very careful with his money. It is a priority for him, right? It's a priority for him. He handles it in a very practical way, but with that maturity, it's almost as if, money takes on a very great importance. And the fact that you have death here, kind of in that line with the King of Pentacles, it's kind of like you've transformed from this lack to this abundance, but it's almost a little bit like a pendulum swing. Okay, we've gone from maybe not having as much to having enough, but it's almost like we're giving that money or that abundance a greater clout than it needs to have. And so it's just kind of it's a little bit of a caution, with the death being right over it. It's kind of cautioning you, okay, don't be, the other thing about death is that, you can't take it with you, right? Money is a nice thing to have, but, love and experiences, it is almost a little bit like, don't let it rule your life, because you can't take it with you. When you pass on, the great unknown, it can be important and have relevance in the physical plane, but everything in moderation, right? Sometimes when you become too spiritual, you need to get grounded, you need to put more importance on money, but then sometimes when you put too much importance on money, then you need to kind of balance the scales a little bit and remember that to either pay it forward or to, not let it make you become miserly. Now, your future was the 4 cards that wanted to come out, and in the center of these 4 cards, you got two more major arcana. So definitely we got some heavy energy here, but you got the 9 of Rods. And the 9 of Rods is that guy who's been through the war, right? With the bandage over his head. He's fighting, right? He's a little bit battle worn. He's cautious, right? He can go back to battle if he needs to, but it's almost as if, gosh, I came from lack. My station where I actually have, I came from lack. I got to that station where I have money, and now I have to defend it, right? I'm never going back. I'm not going back. Let me fight, if I have to fight, It's almost like, and again, that can also be a little bit of the King of Pentacles vibe, is that it usually has a little bit of a business world kind of vibe, where if you have to kind of compete, so to speak. So in the beginning, the crown of your string here is that you almost feel like you're defending, you're holding down your fort, you will go to battle. You've already been to battle, and you'll battle some more to keep what you have, right? Now, the 2 cards in the middle is you got Judgment and you got the Fool. So judgment, as you can see, it's someone coming out of the darkness. You see someone who looks almost kind of elderly, and then they seem like they're getting younger and younger, and then they're becoming a baby as they walk past this glowing light. And then you've got the Fool, which is, we had a tarot on the Fool, and what that is that's, stepping off the cliff and just knowing the universe will catch you. It's almost like going forth and knowing that everything's going to be okay. It's a new beginning. And at the root of it is you got the Three of Cups, which is celebration. It's almost like, and the fact, I definitely read it the way that it came out, which is and the Fool really wants to pop. But the root of it is that, you kind of pulled yourself out of this financial lack. You really accumulated some status. You worked hard and you got, and you're also much more mature. You understand money better. And you can celebrate that. You have a new beginning, something that's a calling for you. But the crown of this is that in the future, this transformation, you becoming the King of Pentacles, it's almost as if this is a calling for you. You want to continue on this path, and you have great hopes. You're excited about it. You like what you're doing, but there is a little bit of an element that you have to fight to keep your status. Is kind of the vibe that I'm getting. So, and again, I think the caution of this is that you kind of already. You've accumulated what you need to, but it is kind of like, for instance, your keyboard, you got youth and you got it upside down. I'm kind of getting this vibe like I'm getting this feeling as if you've been through a transformation. I think you've already experienced death. I think you've transformed into a new form, but what you're kind of feeling is feeling like it's a little bit of a loss of youth. Like, now that you've seen what you've seen, now that you're exposed to this new life, now that you're living this new position or this new role, it's almost like you can't go back again. Like you either don't want to go back to that lack, or you feel like your youth is kind of past you now. Like you can never go back to that youthful state again. And the only other thing that I can think of is that you do enjoy your path. You like, definitely the money is a nice, you feel stable, but I do feel like maybe there might be some things that you need to do. There might be some kind of facets of either your job or your life now after this transformation that doesn't allow you so much joy. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm seeing someone go from old to young, and someone being very defensive, like protective, as if you can't be a kid again. And again, the fact that death is kind of, when I see these two characters to get together, it looks like death is holding out his hand to collect the pentacle, right? And it looks like the King of Pentacles is just like, no, I'm not giving this to you, right? And I think it really is telling you that it is just a little bit of word of caution. You can definitely fight to keep what's yours, but just remember, physical pleasures, don't let it be at the sacrifice of your happiness or your youthfulness, your sense of, that inner child. And I think that's really kind of reinforced by your advice card, because it says invention. And what this is this card talks about being creative when life gives you lemons. It just says that, it even says it in the description that, if things in life are, start to feel really kind of like the dirge or the grueling, you are a creative person, and it doesn't need to all be about money. It doesn't need to all be about lack. There are things, there are a few things in life that are free and that you don't have to fight for. And try not to sacrifice your youth or your sense of, again, that Fool is about that too. It's about feeling that freedom. I think it's telling you, don't lose that freedom. Just because you have stability now, it doesn't, the almighty dollar doesn't need to rule everything. But whatever it is that you're feeling defensive about, you really want to analyze that. Whatever you feel like you need to protect tooth and nail, kind of look at that and just remember that, if you have to let go of something, remember how we said, death doesn't need to be a scary thing. Loss can be a good thing. Sometimes letting go is exactly what you need to do, and that's the very core of death. So, but I'm definitely seeing some, in the root of the situation, I'm seeing a lot of joy. But you have a calling here. Something's calling to you, and I do think that it's some kind of joy or some kind of youthfulness that you might be denying or guarding. So you're resisting. But that's in the future, and you have the choice. The power's always with you. But again, death is just there telling you what where you can go, what you can let go of to become who you want to become. All right, so that was deck number 3, and oh my gosh, see, I feel such a sigh of relief because I was a little scared. And isn't that so hypocritical of me? No. Well, this card, lucky number 13, it does that to people, right? It's the real deal, the real thing. But I'm so glad that you joined me for that, and I hope you enjoyed. Again, that was a little bit more of a heavy hitter, so the other cards might not be as in-depth, but if you would like to join me next week, we were going to continue with the How to Tarot. It would be number 14, which is going to be Temperance, another one of my favorite cards. Also this Saturday, we are going to be doing our weekly energy card reading, which is just a general energy for the next 7 days. And I hope you can join me starting January 1st. I am actually participating in a daily blog sprint. It is the 31 Days of Tarot. And what it is where I post a very brief video. It's not going to be anywhere near as long as the other videos I do. It's going to be like, anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes at max, where it is hosted by Ethany here on YouTube, and we ask one question each day for the 31 days in January, and it just kind of gives you insight into the world of tarot and why we love this metaphysical subject and New Age, and the questions that tarot readers get asked all the time. So I hope you can join me for that, and I hope you have a good rest of your week, and see you in the next video. Bye.